In April 1943, the Mediterranean Sea shimmered with an eerie darkness beneath a pale, ghostly moon. Waves lapped softly against the sandy shores near Huelva, Spain, carrying with them a peculiar object, a lifeless body drifting in from the ocean's depths. At first, locals assumed it was just a fisherman lost to tragedy. But a closer look revealed something far stranger. Tucked inside the pockets of the corpse were classified Allied documents. These weren't just ordinary maps or rough sketches. The papers outlined precise attack targets, deployment timelines, troop numbers, and the exact spots where American and British soldiers would storm ashore, details sharp enough to make any intelligence officer's brow furrow. When word reached Hitler through Spain's espionage channels, he swallowed the bait whole. That unwavering trust led to 15,000 German troops being pulled from their true defensive posts, all while the Allies quietly geared up for a massive landing in Sicily. Behind this mysterious corpse loomed the cunning minds of British Royal Navy officers Ewen Montagu and Charles Cholmondeley. In a shadowy intelligence room, they meticulously crafted every detail, forged love letters, receipts, keys, theatre tickets, each piece carefully chosen to breathe life into the fiction of Major Martin. On the open sea, the air hung heavy, thick with the briny scent of salt water and the acrid tang of gunpowder, mingling with the pounding heartbeats of young soldiers yet to face the true horrors of war. Scattered across 300 ships, tens of thousands of American troops gripped their M1 Garands, Thompson submachine guns, Springfield rifles, grenades, and light mortars, awaiting the order to storm Sicily's beaches, where every step could meet a hail of bullets from German bunkers and booby traps. Their mission wasn't just to seize ground, but to carve a path for the Allies into Italy, shattering the Mediterranean defensive line and securing a crucial strategic edge for the entire European front. Early in 1943, fresh off a hard-fought victory in North Africa, the Allies stood at the threshold of Europe, a doorway fraught with peril. All eyes turned to Sicily, the strategic island at Italy's toe, where every advance could cost the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers. Sicily was the obvious target, but that very clarity gnawed at the generals. How could they secure victory while sparing as many of their men as possible? In a dimly lit room, flickering lamplight danced across a large wooden table where Royal Navy generals and intelligence officers gathered. A sprawling map of Sicily lay before them, dotted with red pins marking German artillery positions and crisscrossed with lines tracing the enemy's dense defensive network. "We've won in North Africa, but the path into Europe is still blocked," a naval general began, his voice low and steady, scanning the room. "Sicily. It's the obvious choice, but a head-on assault could cost tens of thousands of lives." An intelligence officer lifted a stack of classified documents, pages meticulously typed, stamped with authoritative signatures still crisp. "This isn't speculation," he said, his tone quiet but firm. "In our internal memos, we've written, we need to convince Hitler that Sicily isn't the target." Silence gripped the room. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone, not just for the soldiers' lives at stake, but for the burden of shaping the war's course. Minds raced. How could they deceive Hitler's watchful eyes? How could they divert the enemy while preserving Allied forces? The idea didn't spark with the flair of a Hollywood script, but through quiet exchanges and scribbled notes. If the enemy was convinced Greece was the focal point, they had to believe it at all costs. Someone dug up an old 1939 memo, the Trout memo, where a rough tactic had been mentioned, planting fake documents on a corpse to mislead the enemy's gaze. Some might scoff, but for those weighing life and death, any ploy was worth a shot. An audacious plan began to take shape in the sharp gazes of Ewen Montagu and Charles Cholmondeley. They studied the map, calculating distances, sea routes, and every chance of detection. In that moment, the room realized, to save thousands of lives, they'd have to wield imagination as a weapon. Let's float a body with forged papers where German intelligence can find it. The order was given, launching a daring, silent, cunning operation that would reshape countless fates. In the dim glow of the room, the faint light seemed to pierce through every idea as they debated ocean currents, The preservation of a body in salt water, the type of envelope that might raise a postman's suspicions, and the scraps of paper just convincing enough to conjure a believable life. Each detail was a delicate stitch in a tapestry of deception: a smudged love letter, a frayed laundry bill, a small key to a fictional apartment. The technical challenge loomed like a cold, hard question. How do you turn a paper ruse into a person convincing enough to be trusted? They needed a real corpse, and more than that, a life story so airtight that anyone prying into it would buy it as the tale of someone who'd truly lived. Montague and Cholmondeley didn't half-step. They crafted each piece of a fabricated identity like tailors stitching armor: a name, a rank, a tear-stained love letter, a worn laundry receipt, a tarnished key, an intact theatre ticket, fragments of a life that made it all feel real. The plan, formally drafted and submitted on the 4th of February 1943, wasn't a fleeting whim. It was a meticulously orchestrated sequence of moves. They found their man in an overlooked corner, Glynd W. Michael, a homeless Londoner who'd died of poisoning in January 1943. His anonymous, forgotten frame was chosen for a singular performance. They dressed him in a military uniform, placed a leather briefcase in his hand, and inside it, an entire staged existence. Letters from Pam, with tear-smudged ink, a forged ID card, receipts, and, most crucially, a set of strategic documents, falsely declaring that the Allies' invasion targets were Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. Every detail was scrutinized like a forensic test. The paper had to yellow just right for its age. The ink needed to settle as if penned long ago. The envelope required subtle signs of being torn open. When it was done, they weren't holding an abstract scheme anymore. It was a fabricated person, so complete that, if placed in the real world, he'd pass as one of the living. And that counterfeit figure would stride, silent but weighty, into the current of history. They didn't just craft a fake life, they had to ensure the body itself was convincing enough to fool coroners and sharp-eyed spies. The process began in the hospital's cold storage. They knew the corpse could only be used within a tight window if it was to look like a fresh drowning victim rather than a decomposing husk. So, the body was kept in a refrigerated unit at about 4 degrees Celsius until the moment of action. Experts warned it had to be deployed within a few months, before decay crossed an unacceptable threshold. When the time came to execute, the body was placed in a specially designed steel canister packed with about 21 pounds of dry ice. As the dry ice sublimated, it filled the canister with carbon dioxide, displacing oxygen and creating a temporary environment that slowed decomposition. A clever trick to preserve the body without an electronic refrigerator on the ship. The canister was meticulously sealed and driven to a naval base in Greenock, then loaded onto the submarine tasked with the mission. Securing the briefcase to the body required its own finesse. The leather case couldn't be tied too loosely, lest it float away, nor too tightly, risking an unnatural appearance. To counter the effects of rigor mortis, which could make the briefcase sit oddly, they used a chain system like those for bank couriers, a small chain threaded discreetly through the sleeve to the coat's waistband, holding the case in place while looking effortless. Sensitive documents were slipped into envelopes, lightly handled to appear opened and resealed. The ID cards, personal items, Pam's letters, receipts, keys, a movie ticket were carefully weathered to look worn but not tattered. The date, time, and drop point were calculated with nautical precision. They factored in ocean currents, wind direction, and tidal cycles to pinpoint a spot off Spain's coast where the body would likely wash ashore near Huelva, a port where Spanish authorities had ties to German Abwehr intelligence. When everything was set, the plan was no longer a paper jest. It became a silent spearhead, cast into the sea, testing whether history could be steered by a perfectly staged story. In that moment, no one could have imagined that an anonymous corpse adrift would be poised to forge a historic triumph. The gap was undeniable. America had turned industry into a weapon, forged resolve into steel, and transformed setbacks into overwhelming strength. This wasn't just the story of a rifle, it was proof that when a nation unites, it can bend the course of history itself. On the 10th of July 1943, dawn broke over Sicily in a blaze of fire. The white sands of Gela Beach bore the bootprints of American soldiers from the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. They clung tightly to their M1 Garands as German Jew 88 seconds, and Stukas roared overhead, raining bombs onto the shore. Facing them were battle-hardened German and Italian units, armed with Kar-98Ks, MG-42S, and volley after volley, the Garands roared without pause. The Kar-98K's 15 to 20 rounds per minute couldn't hold a candle to the Garand's 40-50. While German soldiers fumbled with their bolts, realigning their sights after each shot, American troops just kept squeezing the trigger, maintaining a relentless cadence. A war correspondent for Stars and Stripes captured the scene. The Germans thought they had the upper hand, but in mere minutes, our semi-automatic firepower snuffed out their machine gun nests and cut down every enemy squad that dared to charge from their trenches. The Battle of Gela became a living testament. The Garand wasn't just a rifle, it was a doctrine, a decision from Washington that every American soldier deserved the finest firepower available. From Sicily, the M1 Garand's reputation spread like wildfire. German reports began describing a strange, rapid-firing rifle. And in their records, one chilling line stood out. On the 6th of June 1944, the skies over Normandy thundered with the roar of thousands of Allied aircraft engines. Aboard cramped landing craft, American soldiers from the 29th and 1st Divisions gripped their Garands tightly. Facing them, Hitler's Atlantic Wall. Gun emplacements, MG-42S, mines, and barbed wire all convinced the Germans that no one could survive setting foot on Omaha Beach. High in a bunker, German Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Mertens, a veteran of Kharkov and Stalingrad, peered through his binoculars. He was certain his Kar-98Ks and MG-42S could obliterate the incoming American wave. He'd seen the Soviet Red Army collapse under firestorms on the Eastern Front. Why would today be any different? But as American troops pushed through wet sand and barbed wire, Mertens heard an eerily familiar sound, not the slow, deliberate cracks of bolt-action rifles. Instead, a relentless, precise barrage rang out like a deadly orchestra. It was the M1 Garand. While German soldiers paused to work their bolts shot by shot, American troops unleashed a relentless stream of fire, pinning down every pillbox slit. Each American seemed to wield the firepower of 3 Germans. A Wehrmacht report dated the 15th of June 1944 bluntly lamented, "The enemy hardly pauses to reload. Their firepower feels twice as heavy as their actual numbers." The bunkers, once deemed impregnable, fell silent under the hail of Garand rounds, combined with grenades and naval artillery. Hitler's vaunted defensive system, a source of pride, now teetered before soldiers shouldering a weapon the Germans had initially scoffed at. Within the first week at Normandy, German units sent urgent dispatches to Berlin, describing the Garand as a technological edge for the Americans. But by then, it was far too late. American factories had churned out over 3 million Garands, while Germany had only managed a smattering of experimental G-43S outdated and in short supply. In the rain-soaked night of Normandy, the 12th of June, 1944, Private Hans Weber, a 20-year-old from Cologne, huddled in a makeshift shelter. His trembling hands scrawled a few lines in a sodden notebook. "We were taught that our Kar-98K was the most accurate and reliable rifle in the world. We believed it until we met the Americans. They don't pause to work a bolt like we do. A single American soldier can fire 8 rounds in a flash, then reload in a heartbeat. I watched my comrades fall, one by one, not because they were lesser men, but because they couldn't shoot back fast enough. Hans had once believed that iron discipline and the MG-42 machine gun, Hitler's buzzsaw, would form an unbreakable wall. But even the MG-42 couldn't close the gap when every American carried what amounted to a personal semi-automatic war machine. Lieutenant Colonel Fritz Bayerlein, after the Normandy battles, reported bluntly to his superiors, "The American rifle doubles the firepower in each soldier's hands. They shoot while moving, shoot while advancing, while our men must stop to chamber each round. This is a disadvantage no amount of spirit or discipline can overcome." In every diary page, every report, the truth grew clearer. The Car 98K, once a source of pride, was now a fading shadow of the past, outmatched by the Garand, the bullet-spitting machine America placed in the hands of every soldier. The 6th of June 1944, Omaha Beach. In a frigid concrete bunker, German Sergeant Kurt Hoffmann clutched his Car 98K. He'd fought through Poland, marched into Paris, and survived the brutal winter on the Eastern Front. He thought he'd seen every kind of warfare. But that day, Normandy showed him something no battle had ever taught. Through the narrow gun slit, Kurt watched American figures loom through the smoke and swirling sand. They didn't fire slow, deliberate shots like the British or Soviets. They didn't pause to work a bolt. Instead, each American soldier seemed to become a one-man machine gun, their relentless volleys pounding like a deafening swarm. Kurt took careful aim and squeezed the trigger. A single Mauser round flew. He yanked the bolt back, losing a heartbeat's time. When he looked up again, 3 Garand rounds screamed toward him. One grazed his ear, another slammed into the concrete wall behind him. His chest tightened, not from a hit, but from the sheer shock of a firepower he'd never witnessed. Back at the command post, frantic telegrams reported, "The Americans have too many machine guns." But they weren't machine guns. They were just Garands in the hands of ordinary soldiers. In those first brutal hours at Omaha, German officers began to realize their battle doctrine, built around the vaunted MG-42, the pride of the Wehrmacht, was being challenged. When every American soldier's baseline firepower was twice as potent, they didn't have to rely solely on squad-level machine guns. Down on the beach, amid the shrieking hail of MG-42 rounds tearing through the air, Private Jack Reynolds of the 1st Infantry Division pressed himself flat behind an anti-tank obstacle. Car 98K bullets thudded into the sand inches away. He recalled his training back in the States. "Don't stop, the Garand will handle the rest. Just pull the trigger and keep pulling." Jack peeked out and fired. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shots in mere seconds. His buddies beside him did the same. In that moment, they threw up a wall of lead that forced the Germans to duck. Later, in his memoirs, Jack wrote, "If we'd been stuck with bolt-action rifles, none of us would have made it off that beach. But with the Garand, we knew we could shoot back, keep their heads down. At Omaha, the Garand wasn't just a weapon, it was a chance to survive, a strategic edge, and proof that America had stepped onto the world stage with both ingenuity and industrial might." As the gun smoke cleared, German soldiers from bunkers to command posts were forced to confront a bitter truth. The M1 Garand had transformed every American soldier into a firepower force far beyond what numbers suggested. And that was something their discipline and pride could never catch up to. With Garands in hand, a single American squad, just 12 men, could unleash a volume of fire matching or surpassing a larger German unit. No longer wholly reliant on machine guns, Each soldier became a source of suppressing fire. This made their tactics more flexible and boosted morale. They knew, in every firefight, they'd never be outpaced by the enemy. In contrast, the Germans were trapped by their outdated doctrine. They believed bolt-action rifles paired with the MG42 were enough, and by the time they realized their mistake, it was too late. Their rushed attempts with the G41 and G43 produced only a few 100,000 rifles, far too few to shift the tide. The difference wasn't just in tactics, it was in industry. While Berlin was being blasted to rubble, American factories in Springfield and Winchester were churning out thousands of new Garands around the clock. By 1945, over 4 million M1 Garands had hit the battlefields, a number the Nazis could never even dream of matching. It's no coincidence that General George S. Patton called the Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. He knew this rifle turned every American soldier into a game-changer in the crucible of combat. And long after the war, the Garand's shadow stretched from Korea to parade grounds, where the iconic ping of its clip became a sound etched in history. The Garand didn't just reshape how America fought in World War II. It redefined how the world saw the power of a single soldier. The Germans thought they had the winning formula: iron discipline, the pinpoint car, 9.8K, and the blazing MG42. They believed that combination could crush any foe, but on the beaches of Normandy, in the dense Ardennes forests, and across the scorched hills of Sicily, their formula, though Operation Mincemeat had thrown German forces into disarray, the soldiers on Sicily's beaches still faced real danger. Thousands of American and British troops charged across scorching sand, under fire from the remaining defences. Without Major Martin and the false intelligence that diverted Hitler's troops, they might have walked into a far bloodier slaughter. Yet, even against the roar of cannons, barbed wire, and lingering gunfire, the soldiers pressed forward with unshakable courage. They hurled themselves through the beaches, past curtains of fire and choking smoke, without hesitation or complaint, each step driven by loyalty to their comrades, their mission, and faith in a greater strategy. Operation Mincemeat had eased the odds, but it was the grit, resilience, and resolve of those soldiers that clinched the Allied hold on the coast and paved the way for the campaigns to follow. With over 4 million Garands produced, every American soldier became a mobile fire base, transforming how battles were fought. From Normandy to the Ardennes, from Sicily to the Rhine, the Garand was there in the hands of ordinary men carrying out extraordinary missions. When World War II ended, General George S. Patton declared, "The M1 Garand is the greatest battle implement ever devised." And he was right. It didn't just win fights, it changed how Americans entered war with confidence, resolve, and a refusal to be underestimated. Thanks to the Garand, America learned a vital lesson. A nation triumphs not just through spirit, but through meticulous preparation and a belief in innovation. Ordinary soldiers, farm boys, factory workers, college kids carried the Garand on their shoulders and marched across Europe. Every round fired was more than firepower. It was a statement that the world